In 2026, something is said to be coming, something so massive and unsettling that even the most powerful leaders on Earth wouldn't know how to respond. And what makes this even more disturbing is that this warning didn't come from scientists, world governments, or secret intelligence agencies. It came from a blind woman, Baba Vanga. Before she died, she left behind a sealed prophecy specifically for the year 2026, and for decades it was kept hidden, whispered about, and quietly feared. Now, that prophecy has finally been revealed, and what it contains doesn't simply shock people, it forces us to question what may really be waiting ahead. Today, scholars and believers around the world are looking again at her visions, because among all of them, one message rises above the rest. The year 2026 is unlike anything we've ever seen, and it may change everything. A terrible year is coming. A terrible year, that's how many people describe what Baba Vanga saw. She lost her sight as a child during a violent storm, and everyone around her believed her life would fade quietly into darkness. But instead of darkness, something else appeared. After the blindness, she began seeing things no child should ever know. Strangers would come to her with fears, with questions, and somehow she gave answers that changed lives. She spoke of deaths before they happened, of accidents nobody saw coming, of political conflicts and global disasters that years later filled the news. What set her apart wasn't just accuracy, it was the way she spoke about events that hadn't happened yet. Calm, clear, sometimes with exact dates, places, and names. She didn't publish books, she didn't chase attention, yet powerful people, politicians, military leaders, even scientists, traveled quietly to see her. Many walked away shaken. To some, she became the Nostradamus of the Balkans. To others, she was something else entirely, a messenger, a warning voice that didn't belong only to this world. But among all the visions she spoke about, one year always felt different, 2026. Unlike other prophecies she described openly, this one stayed wrapped in silence. Those close to her remembered one strange sentence she repeated again and again in her final years. In 2026, the silence will break. Nobody fully understood what she meant, and unlike her usual warnings, this vision was not shared publicly. It was written down, preserved, and sealed, locked away, in a private archive, by people who believed the world was not ready to hear it. Researchers who later studied her life say she treated 2026 as a turning point, not only in politics or economics, but in the spiritual core of humanity, a line between what the world used to be and what it would become afterward. She never said it would be the end. Instead, she spoke about a new cycle, something painful yet transformative, like a storm that destroys but also clears the air. Some believe she foresaw the collapse of something huge, something the modern world relies on without even thinking. Others believe she saw a shift inside human consciousness, triggered by a quiet, unexpected event. And the fact that she didn't speak openly about it, her followers say, was not fear. It was respect for the weight of what she saw. Now that the sealed prophecy has finally been opened and slowly revealed, the tone around 2026 feels different. Not all of Baba Vanga's visions were meant for everyone. Some were spoken once, carefully recorded, and then hidden away with strict instructions. Do not open until the world is ready. Those who guarded the message believed that releasing it too early could tear societies apart, not because of superstition, but because it touched the deepest fears inside people. The document is said to have been handwritten, gently translated, and kept securely in Eastern Europe, where only a few people even knew it existed. Its secrecy wasn't only about politics, it was also about faith. A secret document is going to be revealed. Didn't list countries, leaders, or exact dates. Instead, she spoke in images and symbols, almost like poetry. But the meaning behind them feels frighteningly familiar to our world today. She wrote about a planet pushed to its limits, strange threats no one fully understands, and a time when humanity begins to realize that it no longer has full control over the future. Along with her words were drawings simple and almost childlike: a burning tree, a broken clock, frozen in time, and a circle of people with no faces. None of them were explained. Now, spiritual historians and researchers study each symbol carefully because they believe every shape, every line was chosen intentionally. Even though the full translation has never been released publicly, the few who have read it say the message is impossible to ignore. What is coming will not belong to one nation, one religion, or one group of people. It will touch every soul in some way. And the prophecy doesn't describe the end of the world. Instead, it speaks about something deeper, a global transformation that begins quietly in 2026 and grows like a wave. Baba Vanga described this change not as one big event, but as a chain reaction. One thing falls, then another, and another, like dominoes, slowly collapsing. She said it would challenge the way we live, the way we think, and the way we see each other. Systems that once felt strong, political, economic, environmental, even spiritual, would begin to crack. Structures that seemed untouchable would suddenly look fragile, and the leaders who once appeared confident would find themselves unsure, struggling to respond. In the prophecy, she wrote something that many people now keep repeating: "The foundation of the strong shall tremble, and the voice of the forgotten shall rise." Many believe these points toward growing unrest, movements, and protests that don't come from war, but from disappointment, from people losing trust in those they once believed in. At the same time, she warned that nature itself would begin to respond in ways humans can no longer control. She said, "The winds will speak louder than armies, and the waters will climb where feet once walked." For some, this sounds like storms where there were none before, floods swallowing places that once felt safe, and droughts drying lands that once gave life. But the most unsettling part wasn't about storms or governments, it was about the human heart. She warned that the real test wouldn't come from outside forces, but from inside us. Families would be divided, not by weapons, but by beliefs. People would be forced to choose between comfort and truth, between staying blind or finally opening their eyes. What the world depends on today, money, status, power, technology, would be shaken so deeply that people would have to question what they truly trust. The rise of a new world leader. Looking ahead to 2026, Baba Vanga painted a vision of America teetering on the edge of unrest and paralysis, a time when the nation's very unity would be tested like never before. She described scenes of chaos in the U.S. Capitol, with protesters filling the streets and the military called in to restore order, while the government itself struggled to function as questions of authority and legitimacy tore the country apart. It was not just political squabbling she foresaw, but a profound constitutional crisis, one that would challenge the foundations of American governance and society. She indicated that this turmoil would not arise gradually, but would be triggered by one unexpected event early in the year, an incident capable of unleashing a cascade of chaos that would ripple across the nation. Baba Vanga did not specify the exact nature of this event, but interpretations suggest it could be a terrorist attack, a massive cyber assault that destabilizes financial systems, or even a natural disaster that overwhelms the government's ability to respond effectively. Regardless of the cause, she was clear that its consequences would be far-reaching, leaving the country trapped between forces of division and desperation. When you look at today's realities, it becomes chillingly easy to imagine such a scenario unfolding. Social tensions are rising to unprecedented levels. The digital infrastructure that underpins daily life remains vulnerable. Political polarization is at an all-time high, and trust in leadership is eroding faster than ever before. Each of these factors, separately, is significant, but combined, they create a tinderbox capable of sparking the very crisis Baba Vanga predicted. When people looked at the prophecy for 2026, there was one line that kept echoing in their minds: "From silence, a voice will rise." Unknown to kings, but known to the broken. At first, it sounds like something poetic, maybe even mysterious. But for those who have spent years studying Baba Vanga's words, this line feels like a hint, a signal that a completely unexpected world leader may appear, coming from a place nobody would ever think to look. Baba Vanga didn't describe this person through status, nationality, or position. Instead, she focused on character. She spoke of someone shaped by loss, hardship, and deep personal struggle. Not someone born into money, not someone surrounded by power, but someone who had walked through pain and somehow learned from it. She even wrote, "He who eats with the poor will one day speak over the powerful." To many, this suggests that the person who rises will not come from politics or military might, but from a life rooted in service, faith, or experience with real suffering. But according to the prophecy, this figure will not be welcomed right away. Baba Vanga said the world would question him, attack him, and refuse to believe in him at first. Wisdom, she warned, is often ignored when it appears wrapped in humility. Only when global tension and crisis begin to intensify will people slowly start to listen, not because he forces them to, not because of media campaigns or propaganda, but because there is something undeniably true in what he says. Perhaps the most surprising part is that she hinted this leader wouldn't even desire power. He would not crave control, positions, or titles. Yet somehow, millions would choose to follow him. Baba Vanga referred to him simply as the shepherd, a symbol deeply rooted in religious traditions, especially Christianity, representing someone who guides gently, protects without chains, and confronts darkness without violence. The silent shadow. Baba Vanga's vision of 2026 didn't just stop at division and conflict. She also foresaw a moment of eerie stillness that she called the Great Silence. This wasn't a calm born of peace, but a pause following months of turmoil when the world itself would seem to hold its breath. She predicted that communication networks would falter, broadcasts would cease, and governments might temporarily go dark, leaving people disoriented and unsure where to turn. This strange quiet, she explained, would force humanity to step away from the constant noise of screens, alerts, and digital chatter, and instead listen to instinct, intuition, and perhaps even something higher within themselves. Some researchers interpret this as a literal mass cyber blackout, a coordinated shutdown capable of crippling global communications and economies. Others see it as a symbolic or spiritual silence, a universal pause designed to compel humanity to reconnect, reflect, and reassess its priorities. Baba Vanga warned that this silence would act as a kind of filter, separating people into those who panic and those who prepare, those who look outward for rescue and those who turn inward for guidance. Her words were chillingly clear. Those who are blind to the voice within will wander in fear. When researchers looked deeper into the sealed prophecy, they realized that Baba Vanga was not only speaking about leaders or politics. She also warned about something far more subtle, something she called the silent shadow. And, according to her vision, this was the true danger of 2026, because it would appear without announcement, without noise, and without resistance. She described it in a way that almost feels uncomfortable, because it sounds so familiar. She wrote that the danger would not arrive like an army or an explosion. Instead, it would slowly slip into daily life. It would pass through our choices, our habits, the things we watch, the tools we use, and the values we slowly let go of. In her words, it would not break the door. It would simply seep through the cracks until no one noticed it anymore. Those who study her prophecies believe she wasn't necessarily talking about a physical enemy. Many think she was pointing to technology, artificial intelligence, digital control, and the way information can be shaped and manipulated. Others say she was warning about something even deeper, a shift in the human mind, where truth becomes blurry, lies become normal, and people lose the ability to recognize what is real. She foresaw a time when people would trust screens more than their own hearts, rely on systems more than on God, and slowly exchange freedom for comfort. At first, everything would seem easier, more convenient, more advanced. But inside, something important would begin to fade. People would start to feel empty, disconnected, restless, even if their lives looked perfect on the outside. And that is what makes the silent shadow so dangerous. It doesn't feel like a threat. It feels normal. It feels modern. It feels like progress. Yet quietly, it weakens the spirit, breaks relationships, replaces faith with doubt, and creates a world where people live side by side but feel completely alone. The spiritual strength. When Baba Vanga pointed to 2026 as a turning point, she was sketching a deep and slow-moving rupture that would reach into every part of American life. She described a fracture so intense that it would not simply show up as louder arguments or tighter elections, but as institutions and loyalties beginning to pull apart and communities that once felt united, discovering very different visions of what the country should be. In her language, this was not a temporary flare-up, but a reconfiguration of the political and social map, what she called the Great Fracturing. Central to that fracture, she warned, would be the erosion of federal authority as regions and states push back, carving out more autonomy in the face of a government they no longer trust. Baba Vanga also tied this political unraveling to a severe economic shock, predicting a kind of collapse that would rattle global markets and upend daily life. She envisioned the dollar weakening, trade channels stuttering, and America's global sway diminishing as old alliances drift and new power blocks form. In practical terms, this means supply chains that once worked smoothly could start to fail, savings and purchasing power could erode, and previously reliable international partnerships might realign as nations look for new security and trade partners. The result is not only financial strain, but a cascade of social stressors that amplify division at home. She also spoke of storms growing fiercer, earthquakes striking in unexpected places, and a terrifying phrase she called fire from the sky. Taken together, these images suggest a world where climate and geological disruptions add a physical dimension to an already destabilized social order. Infrastructure strained or destroyed, emergency responses overwhelmed, and migration or displacement, adding fresh layers of tension. As people kept reading deeper into the sealed prophecy, they realized that Baba Vanga didn't end her message with fear, disaster, or warnings alone. At the center of everything, there was a quiet reminder, something simple but powerful, that the only true strength in 2026 would not come from governments, science, or human control. It would come from the Spirit. She wrote again and again that when the world begins to shake, faith becomes the only anchor that doesn't move. Not the kind of faith that is only in words or practiced only on holidays, but something living and personal, the kind that grows in the heart, stays steady in crisis, and continues to trust even when everything around us looks uncertain. Baba Vanga warned that many people would try to build safety in other places. They would lean on money. They would cling to politics. They would trust leaders, systems, and promises of security. But as she described it, these protections would eventually crack. Walls that once felt solid would crumble, and the people who depended on them would feel lost. That is why she spoke about false saviors, solutions that look comforting, but slowly pull the soul away from truth. For her, faith wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, found in prayer, found in stillness, found in trust. She saw a future where even believers would feel shaken, where churches might seem empty, and faith would be mocked as something outdated. Yet, in that same world, a small, humble group would stay firm. They wouldn't argue or shout. They would simply live differently, with kindness, courage, and clarity. And through them, others would remember what hope feels like. In her eyes, the real danger of 2026 wasn't just outward chaos. It was the temptation to let our hearts grow cold, to stop loving, to stop caring, to stop believing that truth matters. She believed spiritual strength is the shield, not because it removes the storm, but because it carries us through it, reminding us we are not alone. And she also spoke about consequences not as punishment from above, but as the natural result of ignoring the signs. Those who continue living as if nothing is wrong, chasing distractions and temporary pleasures, may suddenly realize one day that what they lost was much deeper than comfort. They lost direction. They lost peace. They became what she called sleepers, eyes open, but unable to truly see. Some people interpret this as emotional collapse, anxiety, emptiness, despair. Others see it as economic trouble, loss of freedom, or global crises. But regardless of interpretation, Baba Vanga repeated one truth: the heart that is not prepared will be the one that breaks first. Still, her message did not end there. Even in the darkest visions, she saw hope not for everyone, but for those who stay rooted in faith, humility, and love. She described people rising from hardship, rebuilding not just their homes, but their values, communities healing, families finding each other again, a world slowly learning what truly matters. She spoke about a generation of restorers, people who survive not because they were the strongest, but because they were honest, gentle, and full of light. They would help guide others back toward meaning, back toward God, back toward a life that is simpler and more real. And then came the symbol, that strange circle divided by a line, with 3 dots on one side and a cross on the other. No one had ever seen her draw anything like it before. Scholars believe it shows a world split in two, humanity drifting one way, faith standing on the other. Others think it is a call to reconnect body, mind, and soul through something higher. Whatever the meaning, everyone agrees on one thing: it wasn't drawn by accident. Even more mysterious was the unfinished sentence buried near the end of the prophecy. When the sky reflects what is beneath, and time loses its rhythm. It feels like a riddle, a key that only reveals itself at the right moment. Maybe it's symbolic. Maybe it's something physical. Maybe it's something we will only understand when everything begins to unfold. But throughout every line, every warning, every symbol, Baba Vanga returned to one central message: this is not entertainment. It is a call to wake up, to take care of your soul, to protect your family, to stay grounded in truth before the noise of the world pulls you away. She wasn't speaking to presidents or scientists. She was speaking to ordinary people, parents, workers, students, anyone who feels deep inside that something is shifting in the world. Her words are like a gentle hand on the shoulder, saying, "Stay steady, stay kind, stay faithful. Don't lose what matters most." Because in a world where everything can be shaken, faith, love, and truth are the only things that remain. The warning for all around the world. Baba Vanga's message for the world was not merely a prediction, it was a warning. She saw humanity reaching a turning point, where our economic, environmental, and technological choices would collide to create a storm unlike anything we have ever faced. Looking at the world today, it's hard to deny that many of her warnings are taking shape right before our eyes. Economically, the global system seems more fragile than ever. The U.S. national debt has reached unprecedented levels, and inflation continues to erode the value of savings for millions of families. Relationships between America and its longtime allies are becoming increasingly strained, while China and Russia grow closer through shared strategic interests. Across the Middle East, nations are moving away from the dollar, exploring new ways to assert financial independence. Meanwhile, the BRICS alliance is building alternative currency systems, a direct challenge to the Western economic order. Every indicator Baba Vanga mentioned, from financial instability to shifting power alliances, is now visible on the world stage, signaling that the global economy we've relied on for decades may be approaching a dramatic transformation. But Baba Vanga's prophecies were not limited to economics. She warned of nature itself rising in rebellion. Her visions of 2026 included massive storms, unexpected earthquakes, and what she called fire from the sky. She said these would not simply be random disasters, but signs, warnings that humanity had lost its balance with nature. Today, as we witness record-breaking hurricanes, wildfires consuming entire regions, and polar vortexes pushing freezing air deep into the south, it's hard not to see a reflection of her words. Regardless of where one stands on the debate over climate change, the sheer intensity and frequency of natural disasters are impossible to ignore. It's as if the Earth is speaking louder each year, reminding us that there are limits to how far we can push without consequence. Her foresight extended beyond natural forces. She warned about something entirely human-made: artificial intelligence. Baba Vanga spoke of machines that think, systems capable of making decisions that would affect millions of lives. She said that in 2026, humanity would face its first true crisis, born from these thinking machines, a moment when people would realize they had created something that could no longer be fully controlled. When we look at the present day, her words feel eerily relevant. AI systems are already writing complex code, generating realistic images and voices, running financial models, and even shaping public opinion. What once seemed like science fiction is now a part of everyday life, and with that rapid progress comes uncertainty about jobs, privacy, ethics, and even the definition of what it means to be human. Baba Vanga's warning seems less like an ancient prophecy and more like a mirror reflecting our own growing unease about technology's reach. Her predictions also painted a broader picture of a world in turmoil. She foresaw Europe entering a period of deep instability, the beginning of fractures within the European Union, political turmoil in major nations, and rising nationalism threatening to tear apart decades of unity. The current economic struggles, social unrest, and leadership crises in countries like France and Germany echo exactly what she described. The cracks in Europe's foundation are becoming visible, and what happens there will inevitably ripple across the Atlantic, affecting America's economy, alliances, and foreign policy. In Asia, Baba Vanga's words pointed to a major shift in power dynamics. She spoke of China taking bold, assertive actions that would force America to make difficult choices. She saw Japan rearming in response to growing regional threats, and India rising as a decisive global player. Each of these developments is now unfolding before us. The strategic rivalry in the Indo-Pacific is intensifying, and the balance of power that defined the 20th century is being rewritten. America's dominance, once unquestioned, is now being challenged by a multipolar world where influence is shared and often contested. The Middle East, in her vision, was a flashpoint of even greater danger. She described 2026 as a year of escalating conflict, a time when religious tensions would reach their peak and the specter of nuclear weapons would no longer be a distant fear, but a tangible threat. She mentioned multiple nations and proxy forces becoming entangled in wars that could spiral into something far larger. Looking at the present, the ongoing conflicts involving Israel, Iran, Yemen, and Syria seem to align almost perfectly with her words. The region stands at a crossroads, and one wrong move could ignite a chain reaction with global consequences. Yet, despite the gravity of her warnings, Baba Vanga did not end her message with despair. She believed that after the storm, humanity would rise, renewed. The pain, she said, would give birth to transformation. She foresaw a world reshaped, one that had learned from its mistakes and rebuilt itself on values of justice, empathy, and balance. The crisis of 2026, in her eyes, would not be the end of civilization, but the painful birth of a new era, one where technology serves humanity, where nations cooperate rather than compete, and where people rediscover their connection to both each other and the earth. Her words remind us that while prophecy may warn of darkness, it also points toward light. The question for us now is not whether these events will happen, but whether we are willing to listen, learn, and change before it's too late. The rise of technology. She warns that a technological breakthrough will shatter our understanding of reality itself, but with this power comes an unprecedented danger. She foresees a major breakthrough in the realm of quantum computing, bringing an unprecedented technological revolution. This advancement is set to shake up various sectors, from finance and healthcare to cybersecurity, all thanks to the mind-blowing capabilities of quantum computers. The rapid advance of technology is transforming civilization in ways no one expected, in ways that are exciting and scary, ways we are only beginning to understand. Tech seems on the verge of recreating human beings into something new, something altered, bionic, computerized, robotic, superhuman. The internet, spider web, has descended and covered nearly all elements of civilization. The smartphone, smartwatch, and smart home are growing into the smart world. Some people who are closely following developments in the field of artificial intelligence are focusing exclusively on the crises that the world of the future may hold. You know, not only AI, but any development can be both a poison and a cure. Derrida developed such a critical reading based on the ancient Greek term pharmakon. If you drink too much water, it can also be poisonous and lead to death. To summarize, the crises that this technology will bring are inherent to the concept of development. Otherwise, it would not be conceivable. Therefore, if you follow the progress of artificial intelligence technologies, you can imagine millions of negative possibilities, and you will probably be right about some of them. However, optimism and pessimism are a matter of temperament. Due to the subjectivity of the situation, there can be both crises and opportunities. Good and bad are human value judgments. It is a difficult discussion to justify why the future world will be really bad as a result of these technological developments. Even if you say, we are becoming cyborgs, one could ask, okay, but why is that bad, and by what criteria? In conclusion, the future will unfold as it may, neither inherently good nor bad, because history is already constructing itself moment by moment. What exists today is highly likely to persist tomorrow, just as it is. More positively, Baba Vanga prophesied that substantial advances in human telepathy would be made by science, allowing individuals to speak to one another via thinking. This innovation has the ability to transform how we communicate with one another and open up new avenues for interpersonal relationships. She forecasted that researchers will successfully grow human organs in labs, opening the door for groundbreaking medical improvements. Vanga continued that an enigmatic, unbounded, and clean energy source will be found that could revolutionize how we power our planet. With the rise of technology, Baba Vanga is believed to have predicted that maybe at the end of 2026, human babies will be born in laboratories where the color of their skin to their character can be decided. This means that the entire process of birth will be controlled. The rise of technology, according to Vanga, advancements in reproductive technology have already made it possible for some couples to conceive through in vitro fertilization, IVF, and other assisted reproductive technologies. However, the idea of human reproduction becoming entirely artificial raises a number of ethical questions, such as whether it is right to create human life in a laboratory setting. Additionally, it is unclear what impact this could have on the population as a whole, and what unintended consequences could arise from such technology. Human reproduction becoming entirely artificial could have significant consequences for our population and society. It could potentially lead to a decrease in genetic diversity and a greater reliance on technology to create new life. It could also raise significant ethical questions about the creation and ownership of life, as well as the role of government and society in regulating and controlling such technology. The development of artificial reproductive technologies is an active area of research, and significant advancements have already been made in this field. For example, scientists have successfully grown mouse embryos in an artificial womb, and human embryos have been successfully grown in vitro. While there are still many technical and ethical challenges to be addressed, these advancements suggest that the development of entirely artificial human reproduction is not outside the realm of possibility. The development of artificial body parts and prosthetics is an active area of research, and significant advancements have already been made in this field. For example, scientists have developed brain-controlled prosthetic arms, and some artificial organs, such as hearts, are already in use. While the development of entirely artificial bodies and organs is still a long way off, These advancements suggest that the potential for such technology is not out of the question. Long before artificial intelligence became a buzzword, Baba Vanga allegedly warned of a time when machines would think like humans, but without souls. In her visions, she described intricate, intelligent devices that eerily resemble today's smartphones, digital assistants, and global networks powered by AI. She spoke of voices in the air guiding people's actions and screens that speak, referring to them as both miraculous and dangerous. But it doesn't end there. She foresaw a new era of digital currency, one that would not just change how we buy and sell, but how nations are controlled. Her prediction of a coin of light, without metal, governing from shadows, has been interpreted by many as a direct reference to cryptocurrencies and the growing push for centralized digital banking. More disturbingly, Baba Vanga issued dire warnings about the intersection of AI and genetic engineering. She spoke of a time when man will play creator, blending flesh and code, and something else will awaken. Her words pointed toward a future where technology would not just assist humanity, but reshape it, entirely threatening the very essence of what it means to be human. According to newly unearthed interpretations, she even named late July 2025 as a tipping point, a moment when the convergence of AI, data surveillance, and bioengineering would reach critical mass. It would be a point of no return. And then comes one of her most chilling declarations. Prepare yourselves, the moment is almost upon you. The storm approaches. By late July, the sky will darken, and the world will tremble. Was she speaking metaphorically or foreseeing a real, global event tied to technological collapse or rebellion? Some experts believe her timeline aligns with major global efforts to deploy fully autonomous AI systems, military, financial, and even medical. What if I told you that a blind woman from a small village in Bulgaria, who passed away nearly 3 decades ago, may have described exactly what is unfolding in America right now? Her name was Baba Vanga, often called the Nostradamus of the Balkans. Born in 1911, she lost her sight at just 12 years old during a violent dust storm that nearly killed her. When she emerged from that storm blind, she could see events before they happened. And what she reportedly saw about America, about its leaders, its internal conflicts, and the year 2026, feels uncomfortably close to reality today. America shakes from the foundation. When people talk about Baba Vanga, they often focus on the mystery around her. But what gives her words real weight is her track record. Long before the modern world experienced its most shocking moments, she reportedly described events that would later change history. She spoke of iron birds attacking America, a chilling image that many associate with the September 11th event. She foresaw the devastating tsunami of 2004 that claimed hundreds of thousands of lives, the rise of extremist forces like ISIS, and even the election of America's first African-American president, Barack Obama. These weren't vague guesses made after the fact. They were specific visions that only made sense once the events unfolded. And because of that, when she spoke about America's future, especially about what would happen leading into 2026, her words deserve closer attention. According to those who documented her prophecies, Baba Vanga warned that America would one day begin to tear itself apart from within. She described a nation so deeply divided that brother would turn against brother, where trust would collapse and unity would feel impossible. At the center of this internal storm, she spoke of a powerful man associated with wealth and towering symbols of gold, a figure who would shake the foundations of democracy itself. She didn't describe this as a temporary crisis, but as a turning point, and she pointed directly to the year 2026 as the moment when everything would begin to change forever. What makes this prophecy unsettling is how closely it aligns with the rise of Donald Trump. Baba Vanga described a leader who would come not from traditional politics, but from the world of commerce, wealth, and power. She said this figure would reach the highest office despite widespread disbelief, even as experts, analysts, and the public insisted it could never happen. In 2016, we saw exactly that. Every major poll, every political commentator, and nearly every expert said Trump could not win, and yet he did. For many who study Baba Vanga's words, this wasn't a coincidence, but confirmation of something she had already seen decades earlier. But she also made it clear that his victory would not bring stability. Instead, she spoke of relentless persecution, endless legal battles, and constant efforts to remove this leader from power through accusations, investigations, and courts. She saw him standing trial, surrounded by enemies, attacked from all sides by institutions that wanted him gone. Yet, at the same time, she saw something else, just as clearly: his survival. No matter how intense the pressure became, no matter how many obstacles were placed in his path, she said, he would endure. Looking at recent history, it's difficult to ignore how closely this matches reality. The impeachments, the investigations, the criminal charges, the civil cases, and the non-stop legal warfare have all unfolded in full view of the world. Regardless of where one stands politically, the scale and intensity of these actions are unprecedented in modern American history. And despite it all, Trump remains standing, still influential, still central to the political conversation, exactly as Baba Vanga's prophecy suggested. This is where her vision becomes truly unsettling. Baba Vanga didn't say the story ended with persecution. She predicted that after a period of exile and isolation, this leader would return to power. She said he would rise again in 2025, stronger than before, and that his return would mark the beginning of sweeping changes, not just for America, but for the entire world. Trump has already announced his campaign, fought through every legal challenge thrown at him, and positioned himself for the 2024 election, with a possible inauguration in 2025. When placed side by side with her timeline, the alignment is difficult to dismiss. Interpreters of her prophecies suggest several plausible triggers, and each one points to a different kind of vulnerability. Some readings name a violent attack on U.S. soil that would spark mass outrage and fear. Others point to a cyber-triggered financial collapse that shuts down markets and banking services almost overnight. Still others warn of a natural catastrophe so overwhelming that the federal government simply cannot coordinate an effective response. The common thread is not the precise cause, but the speed and scale of the cascade. One major disruption that overwhelms normal coping mechanisms and turns localized problems into a national emergency. Baba Vanga's warnings also get granular about geography. For the West Coast, she used images of fire and water striking together, language that many hear as an earthquake, compounded by coastal inundation, an earthquake that either triggers tsunamis or interacts with volcanic and flood risks to create simultaneous disasters. If that reading is correct, the risk isn't only seismic shaking, but the compound impact on cities and ports that serve as nerve centers for the economy. Preparedness there means planning for multiple, simultaneous failures, damaged transport links, overwhelmed hospitals, and disrupted fuel and food supplies that ripple inward from coastal hubs. Turning inland, her descriptions of the Midwest and the South emphasize water in unexpected places, rivers overtopping their banks, low-lying cities inundated, and communities that have never faced large-scale flooding suddenly forced to evacuate. Climate science warns of shifting precipitation patterns and more intense storms, which makes these visions more than poetic images. They describe how infrastructure built for a different climate can fail when extremes become the norm. When drainage systems, levees, and emergency response plans are designed around historical weather, a new level of storm intensity can create cascading humanitarian problems that spread far beyond the flooded neighborhoods. Perhaps the most modern and immediately actionable piece of her warning concerns food and logistics. Baba Vanga did not describe scarcity as a failure of farms to produce. She spoke of distribution systems collapsing, transport networks breaking down, and ports closing, a world in which goods exist but cannot be moved to where people need them. That maps eerily well onto vulnerabilities we already know about. tightly optimized, just-in-time supply chains, centralization of critical ports and warehouses, and complex digital control systems that, if disrupted, would interrupt flows of fuel, food, and medicine. The practical implication is clear. Even if production remains stable, interruptions in distribution can create genuine shortages and long queues at stores. And those shortages tend to inflame social tensions when they intersect with political crisis. Reading these threads together reveals the scenario Baba Vanga sketched: political crisis and mass protest centered on the capital, simultaneous natural disasters in key regions, and logistics failures that turn scarcity into an everyday reality. When you stack these elements, the result is not a linear problem you can solve with a single fix. It becomes an interconnected failure, where one broken system amplifies stresses in others, producing displacement, contested authority, and prolonged instability. That is why emergency planners use the term compound disasters. The worst outcomes are rarely caused by one thing alone, but by multiple failures colliding at once. None of this is meant to argue inevitability. Her images are warnings about possibilities. Yet the value of treating them seriously lies in the concrete, practical steps they imply. Strengthening local response capacity in capitals and cities, creating redundancy in food and fuel distribution, hardening digital infrastructure against cyber shocks, and investing in resilient coastal and inland flood defenses are measures that reduce the chance any single trigger becomes an existential crisis. In short, whether you view Baba Vanga's visions as prophecy or as a stark hypothetical, the takeaway is the same. A resilient society is one that prepares for linked failures, not just isolated problems, a huge confrontation than ever. According to Baba Vanga, Trump's return to power would not happen in isolation. She warned that it would act like a spark in an already volatile world, triggering a chain of global events that would push humanity closer to a massive confrontation than at any time since World War II. She spoke of rising tension between East and West, of conflicts that would no longer stay contained within borders, and of proxy wars slowly escalating into something far more dangerous. In her visions, the end of 2026 stood out as a critical moment, a point where the world would find itself standing at the edge, forced to choose between restraint and catastrophe. When we look at the world today, it's hard not to see how these tensions are converging all at once. The United States and China are locked in an increasingly hostile standoff over Taiwan, with military posturing on both sides becoming more visible and more aggressive. The war in Ukraine continues with no clear path to resolution, pulling major powers deeper into the conflict. North Korea has resumed its weapons programs, openly testing missiles and challenging international pressure, while Iran moves closer to nuclear capability, despite repeated warnings. These are not isolated crises unfolding one at a time. They are flashpoints igniting simultaneously, exactly the kind of global pressure buildup Baba Vanga warned about. Yet what makes her predictions about 2026 especially compelling is that she didn't only describe destruction. Alongside the chaos, she spoke of a great awakening, a moment when people around the world would begin to see through narratives they had accepted for decades. She believed that as institutions lost credibility and old systems began to crack, ordinary citizens would start reclaiming their voices. According to her, 2026 would be the year when grassroots movements gained momentum, when people challenged entrenched power structures, and when the first real steps toward a new kind of society quietly began to take shape. We're already seeing signs of this awakening in ways that few would have expected. Trust in mainstream media has reached historic lows, and many people no longer accept official narratives without question. Alternative platforms are challenging the dominance of big tech, giving space to voices that were once sidelined or suppressed. At the same time, more individuals are organizing outside traditional political systems, forming decentralized communities and movements that don't fit neatly into old labels. Whether these efforts ultimately succeed or fall apart, the shift Baba Vanga described is clearly underway, driven by a growing desire for transparency and authenticity. This leads directly into one of her most striking predictions about communication and truth. Baba Vanga said that in 2026, a major revelation would occur, one that would expose secrets hidden for generations and shake the foundations of both government and corporate power. She spoke of whistleblowers, leaked information, and long-buried truths finally coming to the surface. In today's world, with decentralized media, encrypted communication, and platforms that are increasingly difficult to censor, the infrastructure for such revelations is already in place. Information now moves faster and wider than ever before, making it far harder for powerful institutions to control the narrative. And this brings us back to Trump, because Baba Vanga was very specific about his role in this unfolding process. She did not describe him as a hero or a villain, but as a catalyst, someone whose presence would accelerate changes that were already set in motion. According to her, he would force America to confront truths it had long avoided, exposing corruption in places people once believed were untouchable. She said his second term would not be marked by calm or unity, but by revelations so disruptive that they would shock both his most loyal supporters and his fiercest critics. In her vision, Trump's role was not to restore the old order, but to break it open, setting the stage for transformations that would define the years beyond 2026. The predictions just for Trump. Among Baba Vanga's most unsettling visions were those focused specifically on Trump himself, particularly concerning his health and personal safety during this period. She spoke of repeated attempts on his life, of dangers both visible and hidden, and she warned that his survival or his death would play a decisive role in determining which direction America would ultimately take. According to her, 2026 would be an especially dangerous year for him, a time when those who viewed him as a threat would grow increasingly desperate, willing to cross lines they once would not have considered. Whether one believes this literally or symbolically, the warning suggests an environment where tension reaches a breaking point and restraint begins to disappear. She didn't stop there. Baba Vanga also spoke about betrayal coming from within Trump's own circle. She said that people he trusted, individuals close to him, would turn against him at the most critical moments. By 2026, she claimed, Trump would realize that his greatest enemies were not necessarily those openly opposing him across the political aisle, but those standing much closer, operating quietly behind the scenes. This idea of internal fracture mirrors the broader theme she described for America itself: division not just between sides, but within families, institutions, and alliances once thought secure. These personal trials, according to Baba Vanga, would unfold alongside a much larger reckoning. She spoke of a great purge, a period when corruption would be exposed across the entire system, not limited to one party or ideology. In her vision, revelations would extend to both sides of the political spectrum, stripping away long-held illusions and leaving Trump increasingly isolated, standing alone against a system determined to remove him. It's a dramatic image, and it naturally raises skepticism, which is worth addressing honestly. Baba Vanga never wrote her prophecies down herself. She was blind and illiterate, and everything attributed to her comes from visitors, family members, and researchers who recorded her words over time. Critics argue that this makes her predictions unreliable, open to interpretation, or even exaggeration. That's a fair concern, but what's difficult to dismiss is the timing. Many of the prophecies linked to her were documented in the 1,970 seconds and 1,980 seconds, long before Donald Trump was a political figure, and decades before the events they appear to describe. Whether one views this as prophecy or coincidence, the consistency of the timeline continues to raise questions. According to several accounts, Baba Vanga also described a vision of America in 2026 that feels especially unsettling. She spoke of the nation's capital being surrounded by protesters, of chaos spilling into the streets, and of the military being called in to restore order. She described a government struggling to function, weighed down by internal conflict and uncertainty over legitimate authority. In her words, this was not just unrest, but a constitutional crisis, one that would leave the country paralyzed and deeply divided. She said this crisis would begin early in 2026, triggered by a single unexpected event that would set off a chain reaction. What that event might be, she never made entirely clear. Some interpreters believe she was referring to a major terrorist attack on American soil. Others suggest a financial collapse caused by a large-scale cyber attack, one capable of crippling banks, infrastructure, or communication systems. There are also those who believe she foresaw a natural disaster so overwhelming that it would exceed the government's ability to respond. Baba Vanga didn't specify which scenario would unfold, but she was firm about one thing: once it began, there would be no turning back. 2026, she said, would be the year when everything changed. Her warnings also extended to specific regions of the country. Baba Vanga spoke of the West Coast as being particularly vulnerable, describing violent earth movements and a convergence of fire and water. Many have interpreted this as major seismic activity, possibly earthquakes triggering tsunamis or volcanic events combined with widespread flooding. California has already experienced increased seismic activity, and scientists have long warned that the San Andreas Fault is overdue for a major rupture. In that context, her words take on an uncomfortable relevance. For the Midwest and southern states, her visions focused on extreme weather. She described unprecedented storms, rising waters in areas that had never flooded before, cities overwhelmed, and millions forced from their homes. Climate experts today warn that weather patterns are becoming more severe and less predictable, while aging infrastructure remains dangerously unprepared for such extremes. What Baba Vanga described decades ago increasingly resembles the risks experts now openly discuss. Yet perhaps her most disturbing prediction about America in 2026 had nothing to do with politics or natural disasters, but with basic survival. She warned of food and resource shortages, not because of a lack of production, but because systems would fail. She spoke of transportation networks breaking down, ports closing, and supply chains collapsing under pressure. Americans, she said, would face genuine scarcity, something most had never experienced in their lifetimes. In a world dependent on just-in-time delivery systems, fragile power grids, and vulnerable digital infrastructure, this scenario no longer feels far-fetched. Instead, it feels like a reminder of how thin the line is between stability and chaos. The economic crisis. According to Baba Vanga, 2026 would not just be another difficult year economically. It would mark a breaking point, a financial shock unlike anything the modern world has ever faced. She spoke of the dollar losing its dominance, of global trade systems beginning to fracture, and of America's influence on the world stage shrinking at a speed few would expect. In her vision, countries long considered close allies would quietly step away, choosing new partnerships that better served their interests, and in doing so, they would reshape the global balance of power. What makes this prediction especially striking is her claim that this unraveling would begin in earnest in 2026, exactly 2 years into Trump's return to power, when the pressure built up over decades could no longer be contained. When we look around today, it's hard not to notice how closely these warnings align with current realities. National debt has climbed to historic levels, inflation has eaten away at savings and wages, and trust in long-standing economic systems feels weaker than it has in generations. Relationships between the United States and its traditional allies are more strained, while at the same time, new power blocks are forming. China and Russia continue to deepen their strategic and economic ties. Middle Eastern nations are actively exploring alternatives to the dollar, and the BRICS countries are laying the groundwork for parallel currency systems. Piece by piece, the financial landscape Baba Vanga described decades ago appears to be taking shape right in front of us. Yet she made it clear that the economic crisis would not unfold in isolation. Baba Vanga believed financial collapse would be intertwined with a series of natural and environmental shocks that would hit America hard in 2026. She spoke of massive storms, earthquakes in places that rarely experience them, and what she ominously described as fire from the sky. In her view, These events would not be random disasters, but signs, warnings that humanity had drifted dangerously far from balance. Whether one accepts spiritual interpretations or prefers scientific explanations, the trend itself is impossible to ignore. We are already witnessing record-breaking hurricanes, unprecedented wildfires, and extreme weather patterns that push beyond what was once considered normal. Polar vortexes now bring Arctic cold deep into southern regions, while heat waves stretch infrastructure to its limits. The patterns Baba Vanga described are no longer abstract predictions. They are forming in real time, reinforcing the idea that 2026 may not be the beginning of these crises, but the moment when they converge. In Baba Vanga's vision, economic instability, political fragmentation, and environmental upheaval were all connected threads of the same unraveling. She warned that, when systems built on imbalance finally give way, the consequences ripple outward, affecting every part of daily life. If her words hold any truth, then the economic crisis of 2026 would not just change markets and currencies, it would force societies to question how resilient their foundations really are. How the world affects America. Baba Vanga never spoke about America in isolation. In her visions, what happened in the rest of the world directly shaped America's fate, and 2026 was the year when those global pressures would finally converge. She warned that Europe, long seen as America's closest partner, would enter a period of deep instability. According to her, the European Union would begin to fracture under economic strain, political division, and rising nationalism, forcing member states to prioritize survival over unity. When we look at Europe today, the warning feels less abstract. Economic slowdowns, energy insecurity, protests in major cities, and political turmoil in countries like France and Germany are already testing the cohesion of the EU, and any serious breakdown there would inevitably ripple across American trade, diplomacy, and global influence. In Asia, Baba Vanga foresaw a dramatic shift in power dynamics that would leave America facing choices with no easy answers. She spoke of China becoming increasingly assertive, pushing boundaries in ways that would challenge America's willingness and ability to respond. At the same time, she described Japan abandoning its long-standing restraint and rearming in response to growing threats, while India would rise steadily as a major global force, no longer content to stay on the sidelines. Together, these changes would reshape the balance of power in the region, making it far harder for America to maintain its role as the world's dominant authority. What makes this prediction unsettling is how closely it mirrors current developments. As alliances shift, military budgets expand, and long-standing assumptions about global leadership begin to erode. Her warnings about the Middle East were even darker. Baba Vanga described 2026 as a year when existing conflicts would intensify rather than resolve, driven by religious tensions, proxy wars, and unresolved rivalries. She spoke of a moment when the risk of nuclear weapons being used would no longer feel theoretical, but frighteningly real. In her visions, multiple nations and non-state actors would be pulled into a dangerous web of escalation, where one miscalculation could trigger a much wider war. When we look at ongoing tensions involving Israel, Iran, Yemen, Syria, and the surrounding region, it's difficult not to see how fragile the situation already is and how quickly it could spiral beyond anyone's control. At this point, it's important to pause and ask what believing in Baba Vanga's prophecies actually means. Does it suggest that the future is fixed, that nothing we do can change what's coming? According to Baba Vanga herself, the answer was no. She consistently emphasized that her visions showed possible futures, not unchangeable outcomes. In her view, human choices mattered, collective awareness mattered, and the direction humanity took could either soften or intensify what lay ahead. Her warnings about 2026 were not meant to inspire fear, but to act as signals, showing what could happen if the current trajectory continued unchecked. When we consider how many of her predictions now seem to align with reality, Trump's unlikely rise and return to power, deepening social division, economic instability, and growing global tension, it raises an uncomfortable question. If so many of her warnings appear to be unfolding, doesn't it make sense to take the rest seriously as well? And if we do take them seriously, preparation becomes less about panic and more about responsibility. Baba Vanga often spoke about the importance of community during times of upheaval. She believed that when large systems fail, people survive by relying on one another, not on distant institutions. Neighbors helping neighbors, families sharing resources, and communities rebuilding trust were central themes in her guidance. She also emphasized inner preparation, developing clarity, resilience, and emotional control, because fear, she warned, would be as destructive as any external crisis. Those who remained calm and adaptable, she said, would navigate the coming changes far better than those driven by anger or panic. From a practical perspective, her prophecies point towards simple, reasonable forms of preparation. Economic resilience matters when financial systems feel increasingly fragile. Having basic supplies, useful skills that don't rely entirely on technology, and strong social connections can make an enormous difference during disruption. Understanding how to communicate when systems fail, how to adapt when supply chains break, and how to stay grounded when uncertainty rises is not extreme thinking, it's common sense in a world that has already shown how quickly stability can vanish. Yet perhaps the most overlooked part of Baba Vanga's vision is what comes after the crisis. She believed that the turmoil of 2026 would not be the end, but a painful transition. According to her, humanity would eventually emerge into a new kind of society, one built with greater awareness, fairness, and connection than before. The destruction of old systems, she said, would create space for something better, but only if people learned from the collapse instead of repeating the same mistakes. As we move closer to 2026, the convergence of her predictions with real-world events becomes increasingly difficult to dismiss. Trump's continued political relevance, despite relentless opposition, the economic strain felt by ordinary people, the growing mistrust of institutions, record-breaking climate events, and rising geopolitical tensions all echo what she described decades ago. Whether one believes Baba Vanga possessed genuine prophetic insight or views her accuracy as coincidence, the patterns she pointed to are undeniably present. The predictions of political upheavals and dangers are not limited to one area, indicating Vanga's vision of global tension. She talked about Putin in danger and European trials. The political upheavals as a result of the Russia-Ukraine war, Baba Vanga has predicted the assassination of Russian President Vladimir Putin. This prediction gains particular significance following a recent tragic event in Moscow that has shocked the world. The recent attack in Moscow, which claimed the lives of 133 individuals and left many more wounded, has sent shockwaves across Russia and beyond. President Putin addressed the nation, acknowledging the severity of the attack and vowing to pursue those responsible for organizing it. The attack, which occurred at the Crocus City Hall during a rock concert, marked one of the deadliest incidents in Moscow in over 2 decades. The tragedy has reignited concerns about security and terrorism in the region, prompting heightened vigilance and security measures. While authorities have detained suspects linked to the attack, including individuals with alleged ties to extremist groups, questions linger about the motives and origins of the assailants. Speculation and conspiracy theories have emerged, with some suggesting possible connections to larger geopolitical tensions and conflicts. Against this backdrop, Baba Vanga's prediction about a rise in attacks in Europe takes on added significance. Her mention of a big country conducting biological weapons tests or attacks adds another layer of complexity to the ongoing discussions about global security. Baba Vanga warned of increased activities in Europe and hinted at the possibility of a major country engaging in biological weapons testing or launching attacks. Presently, the Israel-Hamas conflict and Russia's invasion of Ukraine remain prominent issues because the balance of international power has changed. Is China rising as many people think, or is Russia declining rapidly? Might be China's development cannot make up for Russia's decline, so the power to balance the West is gradually becoming weaker. There are more and more democratic countries and their power is getting stronger, such as Eastern Europe and India. NATO is gradually expanding eastward, and a pattern of encircling China is also taking shape. Many territorial disputes between Russia and China are being unearthed from history. Russia's rule over Tatars, Chechnya, and many other ethnic states in the southwest, and China's rule over East Turkestan, Tibet, southern Mongolia, and Hong Kong are becoming less and less recognized by the world. The aftermath of the Moscow attack could potentially exacerbate existing economic challenges, leading to further uncertainty and volatility. The huge change of technology. She warns that a technological breakthrough will shatter our understanding of reality itself. But with this power comes an unprecedented danger. She foresees a major breakthrough in the realm of quantum computing, bringing an unprecedented technological revolution. This advancement is set to shake up various sectors, from finance and healthcare to cybersecurity, all thanks to the mind-blowing capabilities of quantum computers. The rapid advance of technology is transforming civilization in ways no one expected, in ways that are exciting and scary, ways we are only beginning to understand. Tech seems on the verge of recreating human beings into something new, something altered, bionic, computerized, robotic, superhuman. The internet, spiderweb, has descended and covered nearly all elements of civilization. The smartphone, smartwatch, and smart home are growing into the smart world. Some people who are closely following developments in the field of artificial intelligence are focusing exclusively on the crises that the world of the future may hold. You know, not only AI, but any development can be both a poison and a cure. Derrida developed such a critical reading based on the ancient Greek term pharmakon. If you drink too much water, it can also be poisonous and lead to death. To summarize, the crises that this technology will bring are inherent to the concept of development. Otherwise, it would not be conceivable. Therefore, if you follow the progress of artificial intelligence technologies, you can imagine millions of negative possibilities, and you will probably be right about some of them. However, optimism and pessimism are a matter of temperament. Due to the subjectivity of the situation, there can be both crises and opportunities. Good and bad are human value judgments. It is a difficult discussion to justify why the future world will be really bad as a result of these technological developments. Even if you say, we are becoming cyborgs, one could ask, okay, but why is that bad, and by what criteria? In conclusion, the future will unfold as it may, neither inherently good nor bad, because history is already constructing itself moment by moment. What exists today is highly likely to persist tomorrow, just as it is. More positively, Baba Vanga prophesied that substantial advances in human telepathy would be made by science, allowing individuals to speak to one another via thinking. This innovation has the ability to transform how we communicate with one another and open up new avenues for interpersonal relationships. She forecasted that researchers will successfully grow human organs in labs, opening the door for groundbreaking medical improvements. Vanga continued that an enigmatic, unbounded, and clean energy source will be found that could revolutionize how we power our planet. With the rise of technology, Baba Vanga is believed to have predicted that maybe at the end of 2026, human babies will be born in laboratories where the color of their skin to their character can be decided. This means that the entire process of birth will be controlled. The rise of technology, according to Vanga, advancements in reproductive technology have already made it possible for some couples to conceive through in vitro fertilization, IVF, and other assisted reproductive technologies. However, the idea of human reproduction becoming entirely artificial raises a number of ethical questions, such as whether it is right to create human life in a laboratory setting. Additionally, it is unclear what impact this could have on the population as a whole, and what unintended consequences could arise from such technology. Human reproduction, becoming entirely artificial, could have significant consequences for our population and society. It could potentially lead to a decrease in genetic diversity and a greater reliance on technology to create new life. It could also raise significant ethical questions about the creation and ownership of life, as well as the role of government and society in regulating and controlling such technology. The development of artificial reproductive technologies is an active area of research, and significant advancements have already been made in this field. For example, scientists have successfully grown mouse embryos in an artificial womb, and human embryos have been successfully grown in vitro. While there are still many technical and ethical challenges to be addressed, these advancements suggest that the development of entirely artificial human reproduction is not outside the realm of possibility. The development of artificial body parts and prosthetics is an active area of research, and significant advancements have already been made in this field. For example, scientists have developed brain-controlled prosthetic arms, and some artificial organs, such as hearts, are already in use. While the development of entirely artificial bodies and organs is still a long way off, these advancements suggest that the potential for such technology is not out of the question.